Thank you very much for coming this morning. I'm Owen Rose. I'm a partner at Actian. And today I want to just talk to you a little bit about some of the things we're thinking about in terms of designing learning and communications to drive behaviour change and impact. And I hope there'll be some interesting takeaway stuff that you can think about and maybe apply with some of the challenges that you have. So at Actian, our work is all about helping people and organisations to flourish. And specifically, we do that by creating communication and learning solutions that we hope will deliver impact for those organisations. And we do that in a whole range of different areas. So it might be in induction and onboarding, it might be around compliance training, leadership development, sales training, all sorts of things across the business spectrum. And we do it in all sorts of formats. So we do a lot of digital work, but we also supporting classroom training and coaching and still doing print-based stuff. So we work right across the learning blend. And we work in a wide variety of sectors as well. So we've got a lot of work with pharmaceutical companies, healthcare, broadcasting, retail. So a big diversity of objectives, of formats, of clients. But pretty much whatever we do, as I say, we're focused on trying to help our clients and their people meet their objectives. We want to deliver impact. And in particular, we're focused on trying to drive awareness and behaviour change, because ultimately that's what creates impact. And I guess, that's really what we're all about, I think, isn't it? I mean, as learning and development professionals, ultimately, if we want to get change, if we want to make a difference, we're trying to change awareness and behaviour. So you might want people to be doing more of the good things, less of the bad things, doing something new altogether. But what ultimately we're trying to do is to get people to do things a bit differently. And that's why we're so interested in behaviour change and trying to create impact. And what I want to do today is just share some ideas that we're thinking about and we're trying to bring into the work that we do that are particularly focused on doing that. And when we're working with our clients to do that, what we often find is this involves thinking a little bit different maybe to conventional models. And that's why we're talking about maybe not just ticking the box when you're approaching that learning and development channel, maybe thinking outside the box, maybe getting rid of the box altogether. Okay, so let's start with a quick box ticking exercise, if that's okay. So don't worry, it's just a mental box ticking exercise. I'm not asking people to share or put hands up or anything. Think about your organisation. Do you think learning, company organised learning within your organisation is delivering the impact that you would like or that the organisation would like? So just have a reflection on that. Maybe it is in some areas, not in others. And when I say impact, I mean behaviour change and outcomes, not course completions or happy sheet feedback. So is it delivering the impact you would like? And then let's think more generally. If we think about L&D as a function, as a sector, do we think that learning and development is delivering the impact that individuals and organisations would like it to? So you might have a think about that, maybe think about some areas where you think it is, perhaps some where it isn't. I'm sure you appreciate I have a bit of an agenda in asking these questions, and I don't know how my perception matches with your thoughts and maybe within your organisations. But when I'm at networking events or events like this and talking to L&D professionals, I get an overwhelming sense of concern that learning and development is not delivering the business outcomes and the business impact that organisations would like. And I think, sometimes I was at an event recently which sat around a table with quite a lot of senior people from L&D departments at large organisations, and it was almost like a kind of counselling session. We're saying, we're being assailed from all directions and we just can't seem to respond. It was one very senior figure from a very large organisation saying, I think learning and development in organisations is in danger of becoming a complete irrelevance. Things are changing so fast, demands are moving so fast, it's almost impossible to keep up. So I think there is a sense widely that learning and development interventions are not delivering the impact we'd like. And we can think of some of the barriers, and you might think in terms of those objectives and changes you were just thinking about, what are some of the barriers to this? What are some of the challenges to delivering impact? Well, we can think of a lot. I think a lot at the moment, there's a lot of talk about pace of change in the workplace, disruptive technologies, different patterns of working, the way that people change in their working paths and their careers, really changing the paradigm of work, and learning intervention struggling to keep up with that and struggling to provide people with what they need. So I think that's true. I think there are new challenges that make it particularly difficult. But actually, we think some of the underlying challenges have always been there. And the main challenge, I think, to changing behaviour with learning and development interventions is it's just very difficult to do. And it always was difficult to do, if you think back. It's hard to get people to change their behaviour. Because we're human beings. You know, we're not just logical thinking machines. If we produce a beautifully tailored, instructionally designed e-learning course and give it to someone to train them to do a new thing, they could take in all of that information and then they might not change their behaviour at all because of all of those normal human reasons that we're all familiar with. Peer pressure, deadlines, established habits, all sorts of things. These normal human reasons. And we really need to look at those. We need to look at human behaviour and human habits, and if we're going to change behaviour and deliver impact. And I think this is a pretty technology agnostic presentation, so I hope that's okay. I'm not going to be demonstrating any systems or talk about any breakthrough technology. And one of the reasons for that is this is really about people, I think. In whatever technology you're using, it is about people. And I saw this quote recently at an event, and I really love it. Amos Tversky was a behaviour change scientist, especially incredibly influential with a guy called Daniel Kahneman, at looking at patterns of human behaviour and the kind of cognitive biases that we all have, and using that to explain why logical, sensible choices and rational decision making usually doesn't happen, in fact. And I think to say stupidity, it's not mocking at all. It's not human stupidity. It's normality. It's normal. Being a normal human being means that you can have all the information, you can have all the right information you need at the right times, and we can tell you over and over again why you should do this thing, but there are all sorts of normal human reasons why you won't do it. And unless we really start addressing those as communication and learning professionals in organisations, we're not likely to deliver much impact. So that's really what I want to talk about today, is how do we design solutions for impact. And I want to share some of the things that we're thinking about and some of the work we're doing at Actian to make things more effective. And what I'd like to do is just sort of showcase 4 approaches. And they're all approaches which come from behavioural sciences. So they're sort of developed by people who think about this stuff all the time, think about human biases, human behaviour, and how to influence those. And I think it's particularly interesting, they're all things which are adopted and used regularly by the advertising industry. Okay? And if you think about it, who are the real experts in behaviour change and attitude change? It is the advertising industry. That's what they exist to do. That's their work. So I want to give some examples of these and show you how they're influencing the kind of things we're doing and maybe could influence the kind of things that you're doing. Okay. So the first strategy or insight is the nudge. So I don't know, a quick show of hands. People familiar with nudge theory? It's quite there now. Yeah. So this is developed from the behavioural sciences. It's looking at how to influence behaviour change. And what nudges are simple, clear and helpful prompts to help you make good choices, to make the right choice. Okay? And probably best illustrated through a quick example. Okay? I've talked about this many times before. Apologies to those if you're in the audience and you've seen this and me talking about it many times before. But here's a classic example of a nudge, okay, to behaviour change. So probably most of us in the audience are drivers. We've learnt how to drive. So we learnt that and we know how to control a car. We've learnt about the importance of speed limits. We know what they mean, we know what speed limit signs mean, we know why we have speed limits, and we know what we're supposed to do when we see a speed limit. Despite all of that learning and all of that understanding, very large numbers of drivers don't use the appropriate behaviour. And I'm not talking here about, reckless idiots who willfully break speed limits. I'm talking about normal human beings who are late, who are distracted, who are being tailgated by somebody behind who's forcing you along faster than you want to go. Lots of everyday normal human reasons why we don't put our learning into practice and we don't use the right behaviour. And obviously authorities spend lots of money trying to redesigning road structures, speeding fines, training campaigns, and they use nudges. So this is a really classic nudge. Everybody understands what to do. You're entering a speed-controlled area. You know that what you want is the smiley face, which is telling you you're doing the right thing. You want to try and avoid the frowny face. And you know what to do that. So you have control of the car, you can slow down a bit and turn a frowny face into a smiley face. Okay? So it's a quick, simple prompt to a behaviour change, and it's a behaviour change that we all instinctively understand. There isn't any signage saying what you have to do. We all know what to do. And it turns out these things are incredibly effective. They're much more effective than speed cameras and many other interventions. So it speaks to the human inside us. And it turns out actually that we're not maybe quite as cynical as we might think we are. We actually do like to get the smiley face, apparently. So that's an example of a very practical nudge, and probably one we're all familiar with. And you can probably think of lots of others, maybe if you're effective. It's very widespread. So let's think about a nudge. How could we learn from that? How could we bring a nudge into a really boring, everyday training, learning and development need? And I'm going to use a few examples actually focused around GDPR, because I'm guessing that's probably familiar for quite a lot of people. So, and for Actian, like every other agency, has been involved in helping organisations with GDPR training and development. So what might be a nudge that could be effective with GDPR? Well, I'll just give you an example from a client that we work with. For that client, we created some initial awareness material. There is a short e-learning course, but then we used some workplace nudges. It's one of our retail clients. So one of them was a credit card, or a fake credit card. So you take these credit cards into the workplace and you just put them on the floor. And we all know when we see a credit card, we understand that, oh, that's important. That's data, that matters. Someone's lost their credit card. So we pick it up, and when we pick it up, on the back, we've got a little prompt. Just a reminder of some of those things you probably learnt about in the course, that this is, you need to be careful with other people's data. And it's not just credit cards, it's email addresses and other things as well. Okay, so that's just an example of a very simple nudge, which is building on things you've learned and things you've understand, but it's trying to make it relevant, immediate, and put a prompt into the workplace. So we could talk all day about nudges. In fact, I do have another presentation entirely devoted to nudges, but I'll spare you that now. But if you're interested and you want to think about how this can apply to learning and development, this is probably a great place to start. So this is the definitive book about nudge. Two American academics, Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein, wrote it. There's loads and loads of great examples in there. And it is quite topical. Richard Thaler won the Nobel Prize for economics last year for his work on nudge theory. So it's quite out there at the moment. Okay, so there's a behavioural change insight that we can look to bring into a learning environment to try and create impact. Okay, here's something that we all tend to respond to. Okay, if we're trying to influence people and change behaviours, this is my second little insight: is use humour, and maybe, I don't know, that perhaps learning and development environments in the workplace on the whole tend to be quite a humour-free environment. But actually it's a really powerful emotional response that we can tap into when we're trying to embed ideas and encourage behaviour change. And of course this is something that the ad industry is really, really good at. And I'm sure you can all think of your favourite examples of a funny ad that's stuck with you, maybe sort of embedded a product and the sense of that product in your mind. So I just want to talk about one example of that, which is, I think, a real classic, because this ad campaign is about nothing but a joke. There is no change in product, there's no change in strategy, it's just a joke. And you might have seen it. Well, it's a few years old now. It's a campaign that was created by Ogilvy for Kraft Foods. So Kraft Foods make Shreddies. You won't have seen it in this country because it was created for Canada. So in Canada, Shreddies were kind of, they're a very well-established brand. As here, everybody knows about Shreddies, but their brand was sort of flatlining completely. So sales hadn't moved for years, and they wanted to do something about that, but they didn't want to change the product in any way. So they needed a campaign, something to get people thinking about and buying more Shreddies. So the story is it was an intern working for Ogilvy at the time had this genius idea for completely transforming the brand, okay, by turning it through 45 degrees to a more exciting shape. And it was just a brilliant. That's all they did. There's no change at all. And the joke is on them because they even refer to their standard product as boring. Okay, and they lived this. They really took it out. And it even says in the small print there, some say they can't taste the difference because there isn't any. Okay, and they so it's just a brilliant innovation. No change to the product. No change in strategy. They even, for people who couldn't choose between the original and the diamond, they had combination packs. But it's fantastically successful. So just by making a joke on themselves, they changed behaviour. Within the first 3 months, I think it was, of this campaign going live, they saw an 18% increase in sales in Shreddies in Canada. 18% in a product which had been flatlining for years. And they also, I think, as we put it, they created a very positive sense of their own brand. So they're probably going to sustain some of those sales as well. So humour is a really good way of collecting and remembering that. So we might think about, okay, how can we take that into our learning environment? Well, I mean, it's probably not too hard to think of instances where you can do that, but where you can use it to really maybe create a connection. So another little GDPR example. That's my fallback topic of a really boring subject where it's hard to get people to engage. We did some work with one of our broadcasting clients recently. We were helping them to deliver their data privacy and GDPR training. And again, how do you get people to engage with this? And try and plant a seed with them of something they'll remember. So we thought about what's precious to people. What would people instinctively care about if they saw it and look after and know, I've got to look after this. And of course we all know something we'd all care about, look after, would be a baby, a small baby. So we introduced the idea of the data baby, and so we used an analogy really of someone bringing their baby into work and asking their colleagues to look after it. Okay, so being careful with the baby, careful who it speaks to, careful where it goes, don't leave it in the back of a taxi, don't copy it accidentally, all these sorts of things. And so this idea of the data baby was just to instill that idea and create something memorable, something silly that doesn't appear connected with the seriousness of GDPR. So these are ways that we can introduce these ideas and still make those serious points. Still make the serious points about taking care, about thinking about what you're doing with personal data. So humour is a powerful one. Okay, moving on. Number 3 is what I call dissonance. So dissonance is about creating a sort of question, almost like a jolt mentally, to sort of snap you out of what you might have been expecting or you might have been thinking, to help you remember, to create something memorable. And I think this is really interesting because I think a term that is out there in L&D, or maybe not so much now, it was quite a long time ago, and you may have heard of it, is this idea of reducing the cognitive load with learning. So you're trying to reduce the effort that someone has to use, make things as easy as possible. Well, actually, in terms of, neurologically, I think, and behaviourally, there's lots of evidence to suggest if you want someone to remember something, you need to increase the cognitive load. You need to get people to think about it. You need to create that little buzz that makes a memorable connection. And that's really what dissonance is about. And again, ad agencies are the masters at doing this. Another example that's again quite well known, so we can start off in advertising first, is you might have come across this campaign, Dumb Ways to Die. Is that nods, hands up? Yeah, I mean it's an absolutely fantastic campaign, and as you can clearly see from this image, it's about rail safety. So it was a campaign, it was made by McCann for metro trains in Melbourne in Australia. So metro trains were experiencing a very high level of incidents and injuries, trespass and near misses on the metro train service in Melbourne. And they had tried all the usual things with, fines and bans and signs in all the right places and that sort of thing, and they weren't getting much traction in terms of changing those statistics. So they're obviously looking for something different, and McCann came up with this campaign, Dumb Ways to Die. And the core of it is a video. It's a simple little animated video featuring these interesting little characters, each of whom chooses a particularly dumb way to die. So it might be, having a wash in the washing machine, dressing up as a moose in the hunting season, going for a swim with piranhas, whatever it is. And there's a really catchy little song. It's worth checking out on YouTube. A little catchy, stupid little song that kind of takes you through all these characters and their dumb ways to die. And I think the video is about 3.5, 4 minutes long. And it's only in about the last 6 seconds, I think, or something like that it talks about rail safety. It says that trespassing on a railway and getting hit by a train would be a really dumb way to die. Okay, so all the way through, you're watching it, kind of thinking, what is this? What's the point of this? And then right at the end, you get the message, just the last thing. Okay, so no learning objectives stated up front. No, tell them what we're going to tell them. We're actually using dissonance and surprise, and this campaign has proved fantastically successul. The video has had, I think this is probably out of date information, had something like 150 million views, and created a huge, kind of viral storm. In Metro Trains reported a 30% reduction in near misses reported by their train drivers in the period after the launch of the campaign. And because it was so virally successful across the world, there's even anecdotal evidence of reduction in trespass and train incidents in completely different parts of the world where it wasn't targeted at all because it has been so successful. The campaign has now been extended, so there's a game, I think, associated with it, and all sorts of things. So it's creating a dissonance, really. This silly, trivial little animation that doesn't talk about rail safety at all, except for the last few seconds, has probably been the most impactful rail safety campaign ever created. So again, how might we take dissonance into the learning environment in the workplace? Again, taking really boring examples where it's maybe hard to get engagement. I'll give you a break from GDPR this time. Maybe we'll talk about health and safety, which is traditionally quite a boring subject area, difficult to get engagement there. And it's the classic place where, we're already trying to reduce the cognitive load, I think, as learners. You've got to do your health and safety training. Okay, all right, I know that's going to be boring. I know it really doesn't change anything or matter, so I'm kind of passing that off. And if we reduce the cognitive load of that experience even more, then it's invisible, basically. No impact, it's not going to last. So we do quite a lot of work with Channel 4, and last year they asked us to help them look at their health and safety learning, which was quite rudimentary and, like most organisations, almost completely invisible within the organisation. Now, they're not Channel 4 office-based. It's not a particularly high-risk environment, but like everybody else, they have to deliver their health and safety training, and they do have to measure outcomes from it and monitor their incidents and accidents. So it does still matter. So again, taking this approach of saying, well, the only way we're really going to get people to register with this is to create some dissonance. How can we create something that's different, that's memorable, and make people think about it? And my colleague James Woodman thought the obvious solution would be to write a music video about health and safety, and then get an authority figure. We needed an authority figure to perform the video and own these messages. So he thought Barry White would be the ideal person to convey these important health and safety messages. So we worked with Channel 4 to distill their essential health and safety messages down to about 3 of the most important ones. What to do if there's a fire, how to evacuate the building, and some other bits and pieces. Distilled them down enough so we could fit them into a short music video. And then James wrote a song in the style of Barry White, and we got one of the world's foremost Barry White impersonators to perform it at Channel 4 with a Channel 4 backing band. So made this video. And essentially, the health and safety experience for Channel 4 colleagues is that they watch the video, which delivers these really key messages, and then they do a very short piece of interactive digital learning after that, just to reinforce those and take them into context. So it creates a major surprise. It's not what you're expecting. It makes those key messages very memorable because they're hung on something which is memorable for you. So it's got that dissonance. You open it up and you think, what am I watching? What is this? This is not health and safety training. And what it also does as well with that, when you create that dissonance, that association, is it's very helpful for then campaigning out and sustaining those messages. So the internal comms at Channel 4, now Barry is the kind of face of health and safety. And so we can have questions like, what would Barry do? What would Barry say? And so Barry is now taking out the health and safety and reinforcing those messages at Channel 4. Okay, so that was Dissonance. Last one, which is about connection. And this is, I guess, kind of related to the previous ones as well, is which we all understand, the value or the connection of a message that sort of connects with us personally, that speaks to things that are important to us, to things that we value. And that's an incredibly powerful way of embedding an idea and promoting behaviour change. We're much more likely to act on that if it means something to us instinctively. And again, to pinch from the ad industry, I want to focus this, which I'm sure most people are aware of, this fantastic campaign that was created by Always, called Like a Girl. So Always, manufacturer of feminine hygiene products, particularly difficult audience for them to engage with is sort of teenage young women. And they recognise that one of the challenges they have in engaging with that particular part of their audience group is that it's a very challenging time generally for young women. Big issues with self-esteem and big life changes. It's a very difficult time. And so they created a campaign which doesn't mention their products at all. It has nothing to do with their products. The campaign is all about self-esteem in young women, making that transition through puberty. And so have people seen this? People familiar with it? I mean, it's a fabulous campaign. They took the expression "like a girl," and again, there's a video which is really the heart of it. And it was saying, what does it mean to be like a girl? What does it mean to do something like a girl? And they got they filmed people on stage, and they got a bunch of adults, and they would say, tell me what it means to run like a girl. And these adults would do these pathetic kind of, and they would say, tell me what it means to throw like a girl, and they would do some kind of, men and women, so the women would do that as well. And then they got a bunch of young girls, so girls about 12, 13, so like her, and they said, show me what it means to run like a girl. And these girls would be sprinting, like Usain Bolt. They'd say, show me what it means to fight like a girl, and they would be in there. And the campaign was about, when did the expression like a girl come to mean something negative, and why does it mean something negative, and really tried to work on it. So they created this incredible, powerful feeling. It's a brilliant campaign, incredibly successful. It doesn't mention, as far as I'm aware, certainly not the main campaign, doesn't mention an Always product once in the whole thing. And from that campaign, I think this had 90 million views on YouTube at last count. They tripled their sign up to their Twitter account. Their use of their YouTube account rose by 4,000%, and they have all sorts of data from their ultimate objective, which was to increase sales and change buying preferences to do with their products. So it shows the power of connecting in that way. Okay, so I guess that's that, trying to put messages into a context that resonate with people and make them feel okay about what you're asking them to do. So I just want to finish with a quick video. So we go back to GDPR for the example of this, because obviously it's my favourite and very topical at the moment, but hopefully hoping to show some different ways in tackling these challenges. So we recently, another one of our clients, so a client in media, owns a lot of very well-known publications, magazines and so on. We were involved in helping them deliver their GDPR training, and we wanted to think about how can we engage people with this? How can we create something that when they get asked to go and do this learning, speaks to them, feels like something they can engage with? So again, we opened up with something maybe that they weren't necessarily expecting to see. So to see how we go here. so that was a kind of, again, the first part of a very short, very short bit of digital learning, which was to raise awareness. And again, it's trying to set it in a context which people who work for that organisation can kind of relate to. Think, yeah, okay, this is about what I do. This is about the kind of things that matter to me. We don't only do GDPR training, by the way, I should say. I picked this out because it's so topical, and I wanted to make some contrast in the different ways of approaching them. We do all sorts of other stuff as well. Good. So, to summarise, really, I think what I hope I'm sharing is that, you know, we work across a whole range of technologies, and sometimes not using technology at all. And really, those things are, you know, they're all helpful channels. They're all really important, but they're all not going to make any difference, really. And you're not going to achieve behaviour change unless you think about those human factors and ways of influencing those. And the way you do that might be really, really different to kind of conventional approaches. And you know, delivering a course or that kind of module or that brochure or whatever it happens to be. So here are just some examples of things that work. So nudges, bringing some humour, trying to create some dissonance, and making a connection. And I think it's all about really creating a moment that someone will take away with them. And we're probably all familiar with this well-known phrase. It's almost impossible to say who first said this because it's attributed to so many people. Perhaps it was no one. It's probably a conjugation. But I think we all know that this is true as well, isn't it? We remember how things make us feel, and we're much more likely to act on that. So I think the real take-home here, that I would say, in terms of delivering impact through learning and communication, is if people remember how you made them feel and you made that connection, then they're more likely to act on what you actually asked them to do. Okay? So I hope that was of interest. I hope there's stuff there you might be able to take away. If you'd like to come and have a chat afterwards, Acting are just here, so no excuses for not dropping in to say hello. But thank you very much for listening, and I hope you have a really good day. Thanks very much.